And also, we're going to record it. Or is a live stream recorded? Yeah, we do record it. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call this December 2024 meeting of the Citizens Police Advisory Council to order. First order of business is welcome, everybody. I thank you all, those are in person as well as those that are joining us on the phone. If you would do the roll call, please, that'd be great. Thank you.
Carolyn Walton, Gail Kurlikowski, Dennis McKiernan,
Here.
Sarah Mack,
Yeah.
Doris Grant,
Yeah.
Imogen Thomas, Leo Reeder, Harrison McIver,
Here.
Philip Lucier,
Here.
Colby Hollifield,
Here.
David Saulnier,
Here.
Jamie Kahn,
Here.
Thomas Hummel,
Here.
Paul Tamburino.
Here. We have a quorum?
We do.
I believe we do. Thank you. I want to take a moment. I know it wasn't on the agenda, but I do want to take a moment and welcome Dennis. Dennis is our newest member representing District 3. So we really appreciate Dennis. If you want to just introduce yourself to everybody.
I'm probably the newest member to this council. My name's Dennis McKiernan. I've been a Charleston resident for 12 years in the city. I'm a retired law enforcement officer. I served in the state of Connecticut. I was a patrolman, detective, sergeant, lieutenant, and for 6 years I was director of public safety and state fire marshal for the state's second largest agency. So I'm here to learn about Charleston and what we could contribute, hopefully.
Thank you very much for serving, sir. I appreciate your volunteering. All right. And do we have any citizen participation? I know we've received one note. We'll enter that into the minutes. Any that asked to speak, please?
There are two people who signed up to speak tonight. The first was Anthony Bryant.
Okay. For those speaking tonight from the public, we are going to limit discussion to 2 minutes per participant. When you reach your 2-minute limit, we will give you a quick little warning, and please don't go over. So go ahead.
Is Mr. Bryant on the call? Can you unmute yourself, please?
If you hit *6 on your phone, it will unmute you. Do we have a speaker, Mr. Bryant? All right, well, if that's you and you're having difficulties with your phone, we'll go to the second speaker and we'll come back to you.
Jerome Harris.
Good evening, members. I won't belabor the point. I have a very long agenda. A couple things I want to note on the agenda. The item 10, the strategic plan, CPAC involvement. I think it's critical that at this point, as the department moves toward developing that plan, that you find and discover upfront what the process is, not be reactive. I believe there should be community engagement beyond these meetings. I think that's a role that CPAC should play. I think there should be a draft and review of that draft and comment, and an opportunity for comment on the back end. And I think it's appropriate for CPAC to play that role. Also, a big concern, I've been attending these meetings since the beginning. The CPAC started with a facilitator, a third-party non-city employee. Then at another point, the department decided to assign that responsibility to internal staff. And at the last meeting, I understood that Jillian, who had done a yeoman's job in terms of facilitating not only the meeting, but the content and follow through and follow up and facilitating communication between departments would no longer be this would no longer be a primary responsibility. It seems that the department is being stretched with resources, and CPAC is not continuing to be nourished. And with as many law enforcement professionals in the membership, incorporating community participation, I think is important, but it will require support. And I would urge you to continue to look for ways to enhance and ask the department to increase staff support for committees and the working activities that you become involved in. And good luck for the new set of officers. If you don't elect Paul again, extending his sentence will be a problem for y'all and him. And my comments said very much.
Thank you. Mr. Bryant, are you available to come off mute?
Can I have the 2 minutes?
Mr. Bryant. Once, going twice. So thank you, sir. We do have your, if you're listening, we do have your written notes that are being included in our minutes. We'll move. All right. Next up on the agenda, we do have on the agenda, it says deferral of October minutes. At the time that was written, we didn't believe the minutes were going to be included, but they were included. So we can still defer that, or if there's a motion to accept the minutes as published that were distributed with the agenda, we can take up that motion. Hearing none, we'll defer it to our next meeting. All right, next up, Deputy Chief.
Good evening, everyone. Hey, I hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving, had the opportunity to spend some quality time with friends and family, and hope you guys ate a lot of food like I did. Since we last met, the department, we've been extremely busy here. It's the holiday season, of course, so we're tasked with making sure that we have officers at a lot of different events, especially parades. The folks here are doing an excellent job of making sure that we get those events staffed. As a lot of you know, a couple of weeks ago, we had an officer involved shooting. Hope everybody had the opportunity to look at Chief Walker's press conference. It detailed and laid out some things that took place during that event. We are also now approaching the end of the year for this police department. With that being said, we're starting to look at a lot of our crime statistics for the year. I can say, knock on wood, that we're looking really good right now. I just looked at our 3-year trend, so we're well below that trend line in a lot of areas. Hopefully it stays that way, but we all know being in this business, all it takes is one event to make that change. We're also in the process of finalizing some things for next year, for 2025, block training. We heard Lieutenant Harrison, he'll speak about that here in a little bit. And also starting to look at our Spring Citizens Academy. Anybody that wants to attend, please let us know. But in the near future, we'll be pushing out information on that. So guys, please spread the word. We want to make sure we have a good attendance for that. That's all I have. Thank you, guys.
Not yet. Any questions for Deputy Chief? Don't let him off that easy.
I have one.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm not sure what's being done about it, but there's a big concern on the east side
Yes, ma'am.
with the Hempstead Park.
Yes, ma'am.
They're using it as a garbage dump.
Yes, ma'am.
And I've read some of the emails back and forth, and I'm not sure. Is everything being done to mitigate that situation over there? Because I've worked in that.
Yes, ma'am.
I did planting in that park.
Yes, ma'am.
I take offense that we're trying to make the east side beautiful. And a lot of the people that's in that park is not a resident of that area. So I don't know, other than I remember back to Team One, you know, you and I go way back.
Yes, ma'am.
So we knew everybody. And so like if something like this was happening, all we had to do is let you know.
Yes, ma'am.
And it was dealt with. I don't know what's going on now.
funny you should ask, because I just had a conversation with Chief Walker, less than 2 days ago. And we had a sit down talk about that part. And, we brought in some more folks. There will be something done about that part. We hear you guys' concerns, and just like the past, when you reached out to me about it, it's gonna get taken care of. All right?
Yeah.
Just had a conversation about that park a few days ago, and the plan is already in place.
Okay, I appreciate
You should
that.
see a big difference here shortly.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else?
Is there any update on the Park Shore Park?
Park Shore Park,
Yes, sir.
was that the one over in West Ashley going?
Near the temple.
Yeah, so I knew we were supposed to have some increased patrols over there, and I think there's a camera, and we're trying to figure out who that camera belonged to. I need to do a follow-up on that for you, and I'll get back with you and let you know exactly what's going on. But I know there's supposed to be some increased patrols going on over there. I think the problem, we're trying to identify exactly who is supposed to have jurisdiction on that part. Because if I'm not mistaken, is it like you can get to it from both sides, or is it just going across the bridge to go to Mount Pleasant?
Go in Park, Poston Road.
Poston Road, okay.
That's
So
the
let me
address.
follow up with you on that, and I promise you I will get you an answer. But we did have a conversation about it a few weeks ago about extra patrols in that area.
Okay, we also asked for extra lighting.
Okay, let me follow up with the guy that does that. Actually, he worked for me, and I'll let you know. I promise you that.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you guys so much.
All right, next up, we're going to talk about vacancy update. There is one change, obviously. Dennis, with you joining, we don't have a District 3 vacancy. Steve, great job. We still have District 6. That's Councilmember Parker, correct? No, that's Gregory.
So District 9 is Councilmember Gregory. He
sorry.
has submitted a name, but that person has not filled out the application. And I don't have any contact information for that person. Send them that information. Then we have District 12, Councilmember Parker. Did send an email. I know he's part of that chain, and she's having trouble finding someone, and the mayor is aware of them. Two student vacancies. The mayor is also aware of those as well.
Okay. I appreciate that. And then the two students, just so everybody knows, Captain Cortella is going to help us with that. We're reaching out to every source. We've asked Cajun, we've asked the new youth director with the police department. We've asked everybody in the world. We're going to keep asking. We want to get some good students in. So Captain Cortella said he's going to own that one, and I trust him. So. All right. And if any of y'all know any candidates through your participation in any of your community events, because I know we have two of our council members that haven't appointed anybody, these are officially now. If they don't fill them, the mayor can come in at any time and fill them at large within the city. So anybody that you know within the city that lives or works here can be nominated to the mayor's office to fill either one of those two seats. So it doesn't have to be specific to that council member's district. We'd like them to, but we want to get participation. All right. As far as my update, I want to turn over to Tommy or Dave. As the deputy chief mentioned, there was an officer involved shooting a couple weeks ago. And as you know, CPAC is invited to participate in the pre-briefing as well as the press conference to understand what happened. I couldn't attend. So Tommy is the vice chair attended, and Dave is an interested, he likes to learn about process too. They both attended. So Tommy, I'll ask you to give an update, please.
Yeah, that was we had a little bit of an update before the press conference for the officer involved shooting, where the chief kind of just gave the basic details of what happened. Obviously, he couldn't go into too much detail because it is an ongoing investigation, but it was good firsthand to just get that briefing right off the bat. I don't know if Dave, if you have anything you want to follow up on that, but and anyone's welcome to attend that as well.
Yeah, the only other feedback I would give, this one was a little bit different than others. Typically, the department does not release body cam footage. That's just their policy while SLED's doing their investigation. In this circumstance, the chief was very adamant in pointing out to everybody involved that because footage was released through the media and whatnot, the timing of that, and we've heard that in previous incidents where that's come up as a topic, that the decision was made by the chief who retains that decision to release the body cam footage at that time without giving extra commentary because he didn't want to impact SLED's investigation. So this incident's a little bit different than the prior, I would say 4 that we as CPAC have participated in. I think that's really the only difference that I saw in that outcome. All right, any questions related to that? All right, so as far as a general update, what I would tell you is it's going to come up a little bit later in the agenda. Tommy and I had a meeting with Chief Walker, Captain Cretella, and Deputy Chief Jenkins to talk about kind of, with all candor, to talk about what's the role of CPAC. What's the department's participation going to be ongoing with CPAC? They had their recommendations. We had ours. It was a good, healthy discussion. That's why I amended the agenda to bring that up a little bit later. But that was part of my activity this month and Tommy as well. The other thing that I've been working on is, again, always looking for people to fill in vacancies, just keeping up to date with what's going on. That's really been the biggest focus right now, is making sure that, and we'll talk about it when we get to that part in the agenda, so I don't want to steal the thunder of that. But really, what's going on with CPAC? As Jerry mentioned in his commentary, what's the focus of CPAC and what are we going to be doing? So I think that's a discussion I'm going to bring to the table as part of the agenda. So that's really the biggest part of my update, is going to be part of the agenda. So any questions for me on the general update? All right. So next up, in a second, let's go to the subcommittee reports. So as far as the executive subcommittee, we did meet. We talked about the different efforts that we're doing. We talked about our interaction with the department. We got updates on what the different subcommittees are doing, different ideas. Really, I would say nothing jumped off the table at us. It's just really, we're at a place with CPAC to define what our role is, with the ERA assessment being done and in the books. What's our role? What's our ongoing role? And so again, I think we talked about that at the executive subcommittee meeting. We're going to talk about that as part of the agenda. So that's what the executive subcommittee has done. Any questions for me on the executive subcommittee? All right, I'm going to turn it over to, so Joe is not here. Do you, yes, you're filling in for Joe?
Yeah, I'm filling in for Joe. So we met in November, and we had a GEO 25, which is the less lethal and lethal weapons policy. We had many comments, 21 in all, that we had enumerated in the committee's the meeting summary. And part of this is a bigger picture, a bigger question with regards to how we're going to fold in new policy based on the constitutional carry laws. So that's going to be coming back on a lot of different of these general orders. We had 2 that were still out for review, and Captain McLaughlin was reviewing GEO 27, which was vehicle pursuit, and GEO 30, which was the authorization to use alternatives for arrest. Are we finished on those? Should we bring that up later?
Are you bringing?
Well, we were waiting for comment back from the department and finalizing.
You're welcome to ask any questions.
GEO 27 and GEO 30.
Captain McLaughlin's on here, so he might be able to provide an update for us.
Oh, okay.
Captain, can you hear us?
Yeah, 27 is being compared to some best practices put out by a lawyers association as well as the academy. So we're not quite done with that. So we can't provide feedback on what was or was not included from CPAC recommendations. And General Order 30 is still held up in the department as well as some legal review. So as soon as there's updates available, we'll provide to CPAC and or the policy subcommittee.
Do we have any timeline on those?
27 probably will be completed by the end of this month. General Order 30 is a little bit more vague. I'll have to get back to you on that one.
All right. And last, just a note, next month we'll be meeting and considering changes to GO 30. And that's the end of my report.
Thank you. Are there any questions for policies and procedures?
Phil, just a quick question. What were you talking about with the GO 25 lethal and less lethal in terms of constitutional carry? What was being debated or
Well,
discussed there?
it is not only less than lethal, but also lethal weapons. So the circumstances under which an officer or officers can avail themselves of their own, for their own protection.
Yeah.
And how that falls into that category.
So that's actually in the policy. It's addressing their personal usage.
That's when they're personally out and around with a weapon?
No. That is when they are on duty.
I assume that's a given that they can carry and all's fine. I
Well,
thought
no, it's not the
constitutional carry was
carrying,
more for me
it's not
or-
the carrying aspect. It's that your response to somebody who's open carry.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what I thought. Okay.
Yeah, it currently talks about unlawful carry as a concept, but since there was quite a few changes related to the constitutional carry, we just need to make sure our policy reflects the law.
Right. So really the only unlawful carry at this point, is it someone who has a criminal record not allowed to carry and or maybe a minor
Or a concealed weapon without a permit.
or concealed without a
How can
permit?
we open carrying?
Yeah.
Right,
We at that-
unless you're criminal or
There's
a
no
minor.
requirement for a permit anymore.
No.
Right.
There's
Yeah,
also
so you can-
in the
you can now
statutes,
conceal
there's a list
carry
of
an open carry
prohibited
without a permit
places.
as long as you're.
Steve was talking.
Well, I'm a little confused on the difference there. Then concealed carry and open carry seems to have there's a distinction between those. Captain, can you help me out there?
That would be more of a Steve question.
Steve, go ahead.
So it used to be, they used to have open carry with a permit, which meant that if you had a concealed weapons permit, they call them concealable weapons, handguns are basically. If you had the permit, then you could open or conceal carry with that permit. The legislation that passed back in March, Constitutional Carry, Second Amendment Protection Act, basically took that permit requirement out, and it basically says as long as you're not a person that's prohibited from carrying a gun, you can do so whether or not you have a permit. They
Okay.
still offer the permits. You can take the training. SLED has free classes for that, but you're not required to do so if you want to carry a handgun in the state. And then you talked about prohibitions. Obviously, people with certain things on their criminal record. You mentioned the underage, you have to be 18 or up. And then there's a list of prohibited places. So you can't carry your handgun into a school. You can't carry your handgun into a jail. You can't carry your handgun into a court, state capitol. There's a whole list of different places that it's prohibited. So a polling place on election day. So there's a number of prohibitions listed there, but otherwise it's pretty much, yes, you can carry as long as you're not prohibited from doing so.
Or any private business that clearly indicates that it's not permitted on theirs, they can make it off limits as well. Great, thanks, Steve. Any more questions on that? Dave?
No, it's good. Good to
I have
update
a
that policy.
quick question.
Yes, sir.
It's when these amendments are made, it would be great if we could see them incorporated as a markup of the changes. It's easier to find and understand if that can be done.
Yes, okay. You won't get those.
Uh,
All right, any other questions for policy and procedure? Thank you very much for your help, and thanks to Joe for his leadership as well. All right, Jamie, complaints?
Sure. Good evening, everybody. The committees will meet in the new year, in 2025, first quarter. One of the open items was, as we discussed previously, the second page of the dashboard that the department maintains to be able to, I assume, limit it by date to be able to see, complaints in different periods of time versus them all being placed together. I talked to Lieutenant Bailey. The data systems manager is working to decide how to approach this with the current resources. We still don't have a time frame on that. So we have what we have plus the annual reports at this point. So I was going to get the committee together in early 2025 to work what we have to work with and see how we go from there.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions? No? Well, thank you, Jamie. All right, communications, Tommy.
Yeah, the communication subcommittee met in November. Lieutenant Gibson provided an update on Newsroom. All the media has access to Newsroom now. If you guys haven't subscribed to it, I've found it very informative and would recommend you doing that. You can pick your location on events and alerts that you want to hear. And I just found it very informative. And then also in that meeting, Sergeant Stinson had an excellent presentation on the crisis communication about the shooting on Virginia St. King. If you guys haven't had an opportunity to go back and listen to that, I'd highly recommend it. I think that presentation, if I'm not wrong, was shared with the FBI as well on hostage negotiation. If some
It was originated as a best practices use of our SWAT team. And then it's just evolved into something that includes a crisis negotiation element in it. And we've been teaching that to our new cadets as we came in. What you saw was a much scaled down version for public consumption, about 20 minutes long, when in actuality, we teach probably a 4-hour course on it to new recruits and officers that want to pick it up throughout the year.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, no, that was a great presentation. I found it very informative. Yeah. And then we also filmed our first video of our little video series that we're going to make this morning. And that was titled How You Expect a CPD Officer to Interact with You During a Motor Vehicle Stop. So that should be published, I would assume, maybe before the end of the year, if I had an estimate. But yeah, that got filmed this morning, and we'll see where it goes from here.
All right, any questions for Tommy or communications subcommittee? All right, let's move on. So next thing we have is CPAC elections. All right, guys, it's time. So first thing we do is, so those of you that are new or don't know, according to our guidelines that are passed by the city when we were created, a chair and a vice chair will be elected each December, with them taking over office in January, which means automatically we vacate our seats. It's not a never ending thing. I'll give you my little editorial. I believe in leadership turnover. Every one of us is fully qualified to do that, or else you wouldn't be here. Leadership is just about standing up. That's about all it takes. So with that said, I think we need to start with, I'll first put on the table, is there a motion for anybody to be the chair of CPAC? We'll get voluntold. I'm good at it. Are you sure? Okay, so it will sit vacant if there is no nomination. Our terms don't just keep continuing, so there's got to be a nomination from somebody.
So let me ask you a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Are you termed out already?
No.
Okay, then I nominate you.
Thank you, Ms. Sarah. And I'm going to be very candid with everybody. I'm very clear on the fact that I do not want to do it. However, if nobody else steps up, I will continue to serve in that role. That's not my goal. Really, leadership should be spread around. Take that to heart. When you say you don't have time, it's about as much time as it takes to drive here, right? You can really be impactful, and it's not a huge lift. I can tell you, I don't exert a lot of energy doing it. Probably obvious to most, but yeah, I thank you for that. Are there any other nominations? Going once, going twice. Hearing no other nominations, I will accept, and I'll continue. Not continue. I will serve another term as chair. Thank you.
And the term is how many years?
This is each term of chair is 1 year. The only thing that you have term limits. So those of you that don't know, when you join CPAC, you join for an initial 3-year term. Okay. And it can be renewed for a second term. It cannot be renewed for a third. So when it comes to term limits, I have surpassed my first term. I was reappointed for a second 3-year term. That comes up in 2026. But I will notify you here and now, and I won't rescind it. I won't do this again. So when 2026 comes, if it sits vacant, that's the will of the body. But it won't be me. Yes, ma'am.
Do we have a second?
If there's no other nomination, I don't believe you need a second, Steve. Heather?
Yeah, Robert Rules, a second.
Okay,
Yeah.
so there's a second. Are there any other nominations? Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll put the vote. For those in favor of Paul Tamburino being the chair of CPAC for 2025, say aye. Aye. Any opposition? Hearing none, the motion passes. Thank you. All right, now we come to the vice chair. Are there any nominations for vice chair? You gotta say it out loud.
I'm just making sure. I
I'll do
nominate Tommy to be vice chair.
Okay,
I'll second that.
all right, we have a second. So we have David and then Colby. Are there any other nominations? Again, I'll give my speech about leadership. If you think you may want to be the chair, this is a good time to practice, to do it side by side. Any other nominations? Hearing none, and we have Tommy Hummel has been the motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of Tommy Hummel as 2025 CPAC Vice Chair, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. Congratulations, Tommy. All right, get ready. All right, thank you. Let's move on to the next one. So the next step that we have is Lieutenant Harrison and Heather Malloy, Corporate Counsel. They're both going to give a discussion on the annual training.
You're loving that, aren't you?
I'll come back to that.
We're going to start. My apologies. We did go out of order on the agenda. That's number 11 instead of number 10. So I'll flip it to accommodate the fact they've already walked up there. So we will hit both.
All right, good evening. My name is Jeff Harrison. I'm the current lieutenant and commander over our training division.
I'm Heather Malloy. I'm an assistant corporation counsel with the city, and I am assigned to the Charleston Police Department training unit.
So I'm going to give a quick rundown of kind of what I'll cover. So today I'll go over our 2024 block training, which is our annual training. I'll describe a little bit more in detail what that entails. I'll cover it briefly about our police corps program and kind of a program, something that we've initiated into that program. And then the Charleston Police Executive Leadership Summit that we started 2 years ago. This will be the 3rd year, correct? And the direction we're kind of moving with that program. And then last, Heather will touch on our review of our training policy and where we're at with that. So first, our police corps program, it's where our new cadets start. We run three classes a year. They can range anywhere from 10. It's just a matter of many applicants that we get and we recruit. So for example, this year, what class? It was 11. Our last class we had, it just graduated, it was right around 16. And this current class that just started the academy this week is at 10. So that program, what we looked at this year was incorporating some part of the International African American Museum. So we started with police class, excuse me for the number, police corps class 16. We started a half-day curated tours. It occurs in the final week of the 12-week program. So they go there, they have a pre-brief, they sit down with staff at the museum, and then they get a curated tour throughout the museum. And then following that, they do a full-on debrief for that. So that's about a half of a day. So we incorporated that in our last 2 police corps, and that'll be a steadfast program throughout the duration of our future classes that we're going to be holding. This year for the Charleston Executive Leadership Summit, we were awarded a grant from the, I gotta get this right, Community Policing Development Micro Grant. It's for 2 years. It's for roughly $154,000, which is huge. We've been operating off a very, very small budget over the last 2 years. What this program is a comprehensive program. It's over 4 months. We meet from anywhere, usually about 3 days a month. So we are so far it's just been in-state. We had any out-of-state yet? No. In-state executives, that's anything that's command level law enforcement to future that leadership development. Very, so what I'm looking for. The curriculum is pretty broad. We go anywhere from law enforcement leadership, military leadership. We have the legal portion that covers both criminal and civil side of it that you experience as leadership in those leadership areas. We also bring in some civilian type higher level leadership and kind of discuss to help develop that. This year, I think we're looking to host 25 executives. The classes have been anywhere from 15 to 17, I believe, and I keep looking to Captain Cartella because he's the one that kind of initiated the original, and now I'm learning to take over said program. So that'll take me to our annual block training. So what our block training consists of is those are the hours that we need to accumulate in training to be accredited by a state to maintain our Class 1 certification as law enforcement officers. So we looked at it in a way to how do we develop this, but also develop it in a way where we're continuing our training, but also in some type of progressive manner. So we're not just picking and choosing topics and going from here to here to learn what we need to know and how can we better ourselves like that. So block training is a 40-hour curriculum. So over about 19 to 20 weeks of the year. It starts in January, usually ends up somewhere in the October. So it's a 40-hour block. So each officer is assigned to a week long of training. It's consistent training. It goes towards, like I said, our state credited hours. So through the Criminal Justice Academy, we required 40 hours over 3 years of additional training. So what we do here is we go above and beyond. So we require in our department 40 hours every year. So what that does is it not only allows us to be progressive and continuously adjusting and adapting to the new trainings that not only the state puts out, but we can look at national trends, worldwide trends, citizen interaction and ideas of where we can get the continued training and development. So every year we come up, we meet with our training committee, consists of myself, my division, which is 7 officers. There's 3 sergeants in there, and then 3 officers, and then Heather's part of it as well as legal. And then we bring in some of our lead instructors in the various disciplines. So part of that program, there's certain areas that we have to hit for that accreditation part for the state. So it's firearms, it's driving, legals, and they just recently added 2 as of July of 24 this year that we'll start looking at. So it'll be use of force and response to resistance training. So you have to provide so many hours for those training, and within that you have to give what they are and the dates that each officer attended. So every 3 years you have to get your certification, and everything has to align so that you maintain that certification. Block training provides that. So how do we come up with our topics? We look at the past year's training, obviously. We also submit a training survey to the department. So that allows all officers the input, the ability to say, hey, what would you like to see? What have we done well? What have we done poorly? What do you want to see? Not only in block training, but our additional training, that we do throughout the year, not just in block training. And then also as far as leadership development in our LDI programs. From there, we'll build the schedule with the training committee, and kind of the last and final, we'll get the approval of our office, the Professional Development Training Division, and then it'll go to command level. And then overall, the deputy chiefs and the chief will approve the final plan. So I'll briefly kind of go over what we did in 24, and then so that'll kind of give you an idea of what we did last year. So I'll just cover the topics, a very, very brief description. If you have questions, I'd wait till I get through 25 because I may touch upon that. And then I'll present what we're looking forward to do for 25. So last year, Mondays, essentially, we did defensive tactics. So that's kind of part of our research. It just kind of highlights the areas that should we need to go hands-on, that we're doing it effectively, safely, and within law and policy. Use of force report writing and our annual report from the Office of Internal Affairs. So Heather entered that class this year. So what we look at is how to write a use of force, and what we're looking for to make sure that we're in compliance is reporting our uses of force effectively. And then we reviewed our overall levels of use of force over not only the year before, but years in past as well. To finish up that day, we had an ethics class He's developed one of the commanders here. He attended an ethics class at a leadership thing. He developed it on his own. So it just kind of goes into the ethics and the kind of characteristics of it was titled Character Statement, to kind of build that ethical basis and those morals and those values that you stand behind, not only an officer, but your person. Tuesday, that's our intermediate weapons or response to resistance. How we address that is we put officers through what we call a 10-room concept. So it's usually like a box of walls. It's probably about 10 by 10 maybe. So what you do, if you were at the Citizens Academy, that's probably why you're shaking your head. Okay, got it. You were introduced to that. So what do we have to look at? We have to look at the levels of force we're going to utilize, whether that's verbal, whether it's de-escalation, whether we have to utilize any of the weapons on our belt, duty to intervene, and that type of concept. So an officer will step in, they'll be presented with some type of force that they'll have to address within that second, correctly use the correct response to that force. Then they'll step out and they'll go through 10 scenarios rapid. So not only does it enhance your skills to quickly identify what you're presented with, but the ability to choose and to negotiate, and actually whether you're going to have to progress, maybe you have to progress to a higher level of force, or we can de-escalate throughout that. That's what that part was. Second half, we did motor vehicle stops. So to kind of touch on the video that you're going to be producing, what that went through is the kind of the fundamentals of what we're looking at. That's what we did last year. Fundamentals of a motor vehicle stop. How do we present ourselves? What are we looking at? Also, the ideas of if a motor vehicle stop extends into a search and areas of like that. One key area we discussed earlier is the constitutional carry. Came up in March, I believe it was. Yeah. So a couple of our scenarios that we were putting through was we had parts in there that would have referred back to the old law set. So now we had a new one. So we had an immediate master roll call to review with Steve, and Heather was there as well, to review just not only the law change and how quickly it went into effect, but we had to adjust our training. So we did get a little bit lucky, and we were able to have a week to where we can sit down and discuss how we're going to change that. So we met with all of our instructors for that block, went through it, and the next training that we went to, Steve, I think Steve was there, and came at the end. We were there to ask questions, but also to work through it so that we were better prepared throughout the year. So we were able to adjust that training. Then we did vehicle combatives. Sounds worse than it is. It's force on force training for officers. Basically, if you're in a gunfight situation or in a life or death situation with an assailant, and your only area that you can operate is a motor vehicle, so you're operating around that motor vehicle to utilize cover and engage the suspect how you see fit. Wednesday was firearms training. It's pretty self-explanatory. That's a full day, 8 hours. Thursday, we did low light tactics. So we have a Brigade Street as our part of our training facility. We have a couple scenario houses. One of them is just dark, fully enclosed. We have to utilize flashlights so that for officers that are working at night and stuff like that. We did some TAC med, some vehicle extractions, and officer down carries should we need to utilize that. Canine familiarization, handler down drills. So our canine division came in, taught us how to effectively track with them, because there are some very specific tactics to that. And then ballistic shield and breaching. So breaching is if we had to force entry into something, say it was an active shooter, we can safely and effectively and quickly get into that area with those tools. Ballistic shield is just another option that we have. It's a shield, it's like Captain America, but it's ballistic. So you need to utilize it. It's pretty effective in anything. Our traffic division on Friday, we did some, they just went over some make call outs, what you need to handle with search warrants, and whether you need to do blood draws or any type of analysis like that, and how to effective mate, which is a major accident potentially with death. So we have some pretty big parameters as far as crime scene and stuff like that. We finished up with we call officer wellness. So this was focused on the wellness side of it for the officer and how we can better ourselves. First half of the year was with a newly appointed position. She did some mental health training. Then she got moved to another area. So we had a transition. So we utilized retired deputy Mike Stanzo. He was a deputy that was hit up on the bridge a few years ago. So he went through his career and then dealing and navigating with that. It was a pretty good, actually a very, very good presentation he put together for that. That was 2024. So how do we move to 45? So Monday will be legals. Heather will be presenting on that. I think it's going to focus a little bit on search and seizure and some other areas as well. We're going to do an ICS tabletop block. That's Incident Command System. That's a structure that we utilize as the agency, and every agency in the country probably utilizes. It's how you respond to a major incident, the different functions, how the command and control, the incident commander, and everything is effectively done. Report and affidavit writing. It's just going to be fundamentals of report writing, affidavits, so that we can make better cases, some better prosecutions, and make sure that we're writing very correct and detailed reports. Tuesday, again, will be defensive tactics and vehicle extractions. How do we get somebody safely out of a vehicle that's not complying so that we're not injuring ourselves or the person? Defensive tactics will expand on what we did from last year, just a continuation so that we're always staying on top of that. Back to our intermediates, what we're going to do with intermediate weapons and response resistant this year is we're going to do both in regular light and then low light situations. So it'll be the same training, slightly different scenarios, maybe some compound scenarios where you're going to have to transition a little bit more. Wednesday is firearms again. Thursday, force on force, except this time we'll be moving as a group. So say we had an active assailant in maybe the bridge run or something like that, to where we had to respond more than just one officer and you're getting into a gunfight or something of that nature. It's how you can effectively navigate utilizing cover, moving, communication to effectively handle that situation. Again, we're going to do motor vehicle stop, except we're going to focus on felony car stops and sovereign citizen encounters. Just how to work through that. Steve's going to help that a lot. And the legal parameters with there. CDU, we get to do CDU, which is our civil disturbance unit. How do we respond to, say, riot type situations or larger type protests and stuff, so we can safely, we have to hit that per policy every other year. Formations, we do hit on it usually about every year. So we'll navigate that. And then CPR. And this year, we teamed up with our community outreach division and our new Hispanic community coordinator, Peter. That's his last name up. Okay. What he developed is a class for Spanish and kind of how do we communicate and how can we effectively, but not only with just the communication part is on the law enforcement side, he's going to provide some historical context for the community, what we should expect in certain areas, how we can better that, and then also how do we build that relationship a little bit stronger and the options that we have for said area. That will be our block training, and that's our plan for 2025.
Thank you for what you're doing, Lieutenant. Quick question. Of the 5 major categories that you outlined, firearms, driving, legal use of force and resistance, where do you kind of see that the officers benefit the most from the updated training?
I would say everywhere, just the constant environment, what we handle. I mean, if you try to pinpoint one thing, you're going to be affected by another area. So they all kind of work with each other in conjunction. So this way we're able to stay consistent with all of those platforms because they all kind of lead into it.
What's your goal in terms of classes? You said 11, 16, and 10. What would be the optimal goal for the class?
I mean, if for a class of 25 to 30.
What's the how many vacancies, if you will, in terms of positions do we have?
I think our vacancy right now, we're seeing around 37.
37?
Yes, sir. But we have a new class starting in February.
When you have 11, 16, and 10, what's the drop off in terms of people quitting percentage?
Attrition. So we have an entire recruitment and division that's in retention. That's I would say, it'd be hard to say as far as class to class, but I mean, the reason for the variation in the class side is just a matter of how many people apply and who gets through the process that we have.
Of the class that graduated, what's the percentage of people of color and gender? You?
No, sir. So what the key takeaway here is if we wanted to be fully staffed tomorrow, we could be because we have so many applications coming in. We are so reserved in who we select to meet criteria, to meet our culture, the department's morals, values, the officer. That's why we are down 37 officers. We could be fully staffed tomorrow, but do we want those officers on the street? And the answer is absolutely not. And that's something we pride ourselves on. And that was a Chief Reynolds initiative way back when, as he said it before. We could be fully staffed, but we were making national news, and that's something we don't want to do. So that's why we choose why we're very selective in who we choose.
So if you look at the overall process too, so we have a 12-week internal program that we begin. From that 12 weeks, they go to 8 weeks for the state academy where they become completion of that. They do 16 weeks of our patrol training officer. So they're not fully into law enforcement and probably until about, I would say, a year into the process. Yeah. So but the caliber of officer that we train and provided.
What led to asking visit and be et cetera at the museum?
There was some input from the community, but also I do think it's important to know the historical context of where you police. Charleston is an area to where we attract a lot of out-of-state officers. We have a lot of, in this last class, I would say we had 2 of the 10 maybe from South Carolina. So it's a very good way to give them an introduction to the culture, to the area where they're going to be policing and understanding said culture. I think that would be the biggest push for that.
That's
and continuing that. Yeah.
And also, as I recall, that was kind of a outlier from the cultural diversity program that was developed internally within the department probably 2 or 3 years ago. So it's a continuation of those types of projects and programs for our recruits.
Harrison, if I could also just, I don't want to answer for the police, but one thing I do is I follow CPD on Facebook and all that. And they do a lot of pictures of the different recruiting classes and all that. So it's not a perfect way of identifying gender. Yeah. Yeah.
You and me both.
That's out
But
there.
thanks.
Yeah.
And the last part of that, there's no more questions for that?
Yes, I have a question.
Sorry, go ahead.
It's my night tonight.
Yes.
I watch a lot of things on YouTube. And I'm very concerned about how officers interact with different people, their culture and everything else. Now, my concern is a lot of the people that's coming onto the force is coming from other places, other states. So how do we prepare these people or these young men or women not to bring their bad habits into South Carolina? And how do you deal with that in your training? Because South Carolina is diverse in its culture, and a lot of people may not know how certain things are done. And I have to say, since I've relocated here in 2009, I've dealt with a lot of various officers. But the thing is, every time I ask them, where are you from? It's hardly ever anybody from Charleston or the surrounding city. And that concerns me because at least the officers from in the area, they're familiar with the culture a little more than somebody that's coming from the outside. So that's what I wanted to know. How do you address that in the training? Or do you test them to see where their heads are?
So that's part of the whole comprehensive, and that's why our process is so long, drug out. Like we have other agencies that come to our police cadet class. So it starts from day one. So they're ingrained in our culture as the agency. So for the police corps program, they're being taught and instructed by not only a vast array of officers from within the department, but other areas from the city as well. So then you continue that to the state. So they're going up there for the certification process of it to be Class 1 officers. So that's continued throughout. So throughout that 12-week, and you grow into the 8 weeks up there, and then it's really kind of developed and probably harvested when you're in your patrol training. So this is when you're put in a vehicle with a senior officer who is trained to be a training officer. So now you're being placed into the area that you're policing. So while you're not in those 12 and 8 weeks, you're not in the atmosphere that you're going to be policing, you're learning about the culture that you're going to be policing in. But in that program, now you're in it, right? So now you have someone there who can guide you, who can help you. So say you do have somebody from the north, So I'm from North Jersey. I come across a little brash sometimes when I speak, right? So, which I was told many times when I first started. So that's something that I had to kind of learn. Like they talk about the Southern way a little bit slower, a little bit more. I'm a little more direct, for lack of a better word sometimes. But because I was trained and had a training officer there who can kind of help me, hey, we're going over here, kind of the area, this is kind of the background of it. To this call, we're handling it this way, we're looking at that aspect. So I'd say that's how we would address it. And then it's ingrained in all of our training throughout as your keeper. Just that help.
Yeah, thanks.
Sir, one of the challenges, I'll speak as an HR person, and I worked with Chief Reynolds when he was dealing with some of this, and we talked about some of the recruiting issues. Charleston Police Department has a unique, I mean, there's other departments that do that, but they have a unique requirement of a bachelor's degree, right? And so a lot of police departments don't necessarily do that. So you throw in the educational requirement, then you look at the homegrown kids, where are they going for their education, right? How many local, are going to school to get into policing or fall into it? That's a problem locally. The Citadel has criminal justice, and I know they've had a feeder for many years. There's a lot of people in the department that came from the Citadel, but as they do that, it's really, can they feed it all through that college program? Because where are they recruiting from? Are they going to Columbia, Carolina? Are they going up to Clemson? And I know they've done that because I know there's been a Clemson, partnership. In fact, I think we had a report maybe a class ago where they targeted Clemson. I believe that was.
We had Clemson was down here for 2 days over the weekend.
Right. And so they're trying to do their outreach to get more people from the state, but the local recruiting challenge is not a lot of local kids like they did back in the day. A lot of them are moving more further out. They're going to school away and they're not doing it locally. So they're not naturally drawn back to say, hey, there's a job down the street at the police department. That's why they're having to pull in from other departments. So I think that's a root cause is we're as parents telling our kids, go off and get an education, go do something different. Or a lot of kids that can't go to college, what are they doing? They're going into the military. And there's a big population here that goes and enlists in the military. When it's time for them to come get their GI Bill and they can pay for college, a lot of them are not coming locally back to college here. They're going to other places and pursuing that. So I think that's part of the local recruiting issue. Hopefully, Tony and I said that pretty clearly.
Fairly accurate. Once again, you asked about training. Also goes against who are we hiring, right? If you have an officer that got fired from another agency, or that's, there's the agency skipping around, we don't entertain that at all, right? We'd rather be short an officer or two and have the best people here working. And then I also look at our complaints. When I was over IA, I could say, well, we've had X amount of complaints and none of them were substantiated, none of them were validated or corroborated. So by these allegations, they're not true. We hire the best of the best that are applying to us, and some just don't make it through the process. It's not just hey, we'll just, rubber stamp this. You have to go through an oral board, a physical agility test, then there's the polygraph, and ultimately it's a chief's decision if we're going to hire this person or not. So we invest a lot in our people, even before they go to see Lieutenant Harrison for training when we're onboarding them.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Something else to point out for the recruiting is they've won. I mean, I don't know. I don't think they publicize it enough, but they should. Their recruiting department has been a model throughout the country. I know she was officer chair at the time. I think she's been promoted since. Yep, she's a sergeant now, and she went as an officer and pursued her education in this and got a PhD as an officer and was brought to different conferences. I know she's been doing that, and I see it all the time. I looked on LinkedIn where they're doing conferences, and Charleston's actually become a model for recruiting across the country, which is, for me, is pretty impressive. And I think those are other departments wouldn't recognize this department for that if it weren't so, because you don't like to give other departments the credit that you want for yourself. So I think on recruiting, they, as a member of the public, I think they've done an amazing job and should be commended for that, and really just promoting how they do it. And I've had friends who are with other departments that have tried to get jobs here, and I like them. I think they do a good job. Some have made it, some haven't, because they do put them through the ringer before they'll let them put on that badge here. All right.
I sort of agree with her. I understand there might be maybe 15 minutes in a class that should say, welcome to the South.
I would agree with that.
And it totally aggravates me for someone to come up and call me by my first name.
Yeah.
And that is something I agree with her that I have dealt with. Coming from other areas, there should be about 15 minutes in there somewhere to say, welcome to the South. This is the way you need to address different people.
And I will, even unfortunately to that, I mean, the youth of the agencies and police and law enforcement we're drawing now, you have to keep that into mind too. So you're bringing majority of our people coming in are pretty young, 21, probably 22 years old. So navigating that, how they've come up, navigating that culture. So it is definitely a work in progress, and it's something probably we could do better in certain areas and do more. But I do feel I'm strong behind our program and kind of how we're trying to develop our officers. He's talking about the process to get in. The process to stay is even harder. Trying to get through the not only police corps but the academy and then the PTO program. We'll extend you if we have to, and if you're just not meeting it, there's no discussions of whether you're going to stay and find another career too. So just because you get hired doesn't mean you stay.
And just to go back to what you said earlier, we recognize and we were trying to definitely get lead from this area to join the police department. One of the things, initiatives that we're looking at going and working with is we have an Explorers program, and these are young folks that are still in high school and stuff like that. We're looking at trying to figure out a way to actually, when these folks graduate from high school and they start college, to keep them here and hire them on here at the city in some type of capacity. Because the last thing we want to do is they're here now with us and they're in high school and we're giving them all of this training. And then afterwards they leave and they go someplace else and they take the knowledge that they've learned here and become exemplary employees someplace else. We want those folks to stay here with us because we know what we're putting into them right now at a young age. We figure out some way to get this initiative off the ground. This is something that we've been talking about, Tony, for the last 2 or 3 months. It's in the works, but we recognize that also.
Has the city pursued, hospitals do this quite a bit, so I'll use them as an example. They'll sponsor somebody to go through nursing school with a commitment at the back end of it that says, hey, we gave you a scholarship, partial scholarship, whatever it is. Through that, there's certain hours you need to perform. You'll come back over so whatever it is, the rules in place, that you're helping that person get the education that then creates somewhat, let the lawyers deal with all the language behind it, but I know the hospitals, they do that. My sister went to college under that type of plan, that she was sponsored by a hospital and she owed them a certain number of years of service, or you pay it back. Is that something, I know you all don't do your own funding, but is that something that the department's pursuing or has asked about?
Oh, we have not thought about it in that capacity yet, but I understand. I kind of like what you're coming from. It's just about having the funding to do it that way. But that's something definitely we can talk about later.
So the city can do, right?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Lieutenant. My name is Heather Malloy again. Pardon me. I am an assistant corporation counsel with the city, and I'm assigned to the police department along with Steve Rummelin. I am assigned to the training unit. I also have a lot of other functions here. I help out on policy, a lot of advice, mainly risk management. I'm a trial attorney. I've been an attorney for 32 years, and the bulk of it has been in the courtroom, defending police officers, defending police departments, municipalities, counties, you name it. So I come here with a lot of different knowledge, and I just wanted to touch on what Lieutenant Harrison was saying about next year's training. We're getting ready to kick off in January. It's a very busy time of year for someone like me. I will review each and every lesson plan in detail, as Lieutenant Harrison knows, because we want to make sure that the plans and the training is up to current law, current policy. There are no conflicts, et cetera. So it's a very extensive review that we put out, and we send it up to our state academy so that we can get their blessing, their certification, and that we can give our officers those required hours so that they can get recertified by that body. So there's a lot of time and effort put into that. One of the goals for 2025 will be to develop the professional development and training units policy. So we're currently undergoing a comprehensive review of that policy. Those types of policies have many different moving parts. From a legal perspective, I just want to give you an update of where I am for my part. I understand you have a policy subcommittee, is that right? Which is fantastic. For this policy, I have paying attention to several different factors, and I just kind of want to give you a little basics from my experience as far as policy developments in police departments. I have worked for other departments prior to this one, and this is kind of what I've seen as I've gained experience in this area. Here's what a good policy, good comprehensive review should consist of. You got to obviously review any pertinent laws and regulations. Your federal, state. Here, we're going to be focused on our municipal ordinances with the city of Charleston also. We want to look at standardization. You want to look at that across the board. Best practices in policing. We are accredited by CALEA. I don't know if you heard, some of you are former law enforcement, so I'm sure you understand that. The Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies, and it's a credentialing body for the department, and it's a voluntary process that CPD is involved in to make sure we meet an established set of professional standards. We are up for our 4-year CALEA renewal this coming year. So that's a lot of work on behalf of the department to show proofs that we are complying with those standards. So we're undergoing that now. But your policy's got to be, you got to look at your CALEA standards and make sure they're up to snuff with those. Also, we're going to consider the department's mission. You can look at laws and regulations and standards, but you have to also look at your department's mission to make sure it's corresponding with that. Other best practices that you should consider are looking at your department objectives and look at conflict. So most departments have several different policies, and you may see some of subjects referred to in other policies. Well, you got to check those too, right? Okay. Now, if you were to, and I've done this, look at your entire department's policies, almost every policy that you have is going to touch on training in some way. That's just the nature of training. It's everywhere. Okay. So you've got to take that time and do a comprehensive review to make sure that you have consistency in your policy. You also have to look at any other conflict with any other regulations. Policies are not laws. Okay. Policies are considered guidance. Okay. Having said that, a lot of policies will contain laws, and that's okay. Okay. But be aware that they are guidance. They're meant to have some flexibility because no situation is perfect, but officers, sworn and non-sworn, for the most part, are going to be expected to adhere to the policies. Another thing to keep in mind, words matter. A lot of times we look at policies and we're like, oh, that's horribly written. That doesn't make any sense. I can recreate that and put some better English, better syntax in there. You got to be careful with that because sometimes some of the language in our policies comes straight from case law. Okay. Yes, you've got it. You're absolutely right. They have meaning. And you know, I'm a stickler, ask Lieutenant Harrison. Every word you have to look at, okay? Think of the word duty. It's easy, like if you're going to write a policy, responsibility as a supervisor, and you're going to list. Supervisor has a duty to, whoa, wait a minute. Duty has a legal meaning. Think of duty to intervene, okay? That's straight from case law. So a lot of times we want to rewrite policy, but we just have to be careful. Okay, we have to make sure that everything's in line. Consistency also is important across the board of how you do it. So just to give you an update of my review up to this point of this comprehensive policy, I've looked at our federal law, state, municipal. I've looked at our states, specifically South Carolina statutes, regulations. I want to make sure we're following the regulations from our state academy. Our state academy governs all academies, okay? you have to go through the state academy to get your law enforcement certification. Okay, we have a pre-academy here, but then we have to send everyone up to the state academy to get their certification. So they will put out requirements that we have to follow, and we follow those very, very closely. They also have a law enforcement training commission that governs that academy. They will put out specific orders. So we got to track those and follow those as well. I've noticed that the state academy is looking at what is called SCALIA. Remember I said CALIA? That's really a national governing board for certification. SCALIA is specific to South Carolina, okay? If you looked at the CALIA and SCALIA, put them close together, they're very similar, but not always, okay? So we have to double check those as well. There's a lot of review and checking. I've also reviewed our internal general orders and field guides. We have general orders and we have field guides. Field guides are more of your standard operating procedures. I'm sure former law enforcement is familiar with that term, more specific to the units and how they operate versus general orders, which are going to mainly apply to all officers and also civilians as well. So you have to look at those, and I've done that too. I've also created a list of required training, which isn't easy because of all the different units. We're just talking about our office's training, but imagine there's a lot of other training that goes on with specialized units, et cetera. Okay. So the topics that you can expect that will come out in this policy once we work through it. We're going to go over responsibilities of the unit itself. We've got to lay that out. We've got to lay out the organization and administration of the unit. The training committee, and Lieutenant Harrison did mention the training committee that got together to look at the annual training. Attendance, our lesson plan requirements. What has to go in there? Remedial training. Lieutenant Harrison mentioned some of the training, some of the scenario-based training that we do in use of force situations. Well, as the officers go through that training, so if your team sees something that needs to be corrected, there's remediation. You need to immediately correct something. And there's different ways you can do that, but remediation is always part of training. Training records maintenance, how do we keep the records? Operation of the pre-academy program, the rules of our outside academy up in Columbia, the field training program, our annual training, advanced training, specialized training, non-sworn personnel training, and a touch on the career development and education for officers, and also some overlap with the promotional references. So that's a lot. I think you can tell it's very comprehensive, but that's kind of one of the goals for next year is to develop that policy and follow those guidelines that I set forth in the beginning. Yes.
Question. So when the policy subcommittee, writes up a bunch of suggestions, recommendations, does that flow through you as well? Are you in the loop on the changes that are suggested?
Sometimes it flows through me, sometimes it flows through Mr. Rummelin. It depends on the situation. But keep in mind that I understand the process where you all give recommendations, right? And then CPD looks at the recommendations. So keep in mind that process and kind of what is looked at, but sometimes they're assigned to me and sometimes they're assigned to Mr. Rummelin. Yes.
What are some of the primary differences between CALIA and SCALIA?
Oh, you're putting me on the spot here.
Just high level.
Because well, first of all, SCALIA is for South Carolina law enforcement agencies. That's the main difference. I'm trying to think of one. I know I saw a couple when I was going through the review, and I can't think of them off the top of my head. I'd be happy to follow up with a few.
I want to say that SCALIA has not lower standards, but a set number of standards that are not as expansive as Kalia is. So that is the one big difference is Kalia is comprehensive. So I forget how many policies you have to opt into to where Scalia is at a lower rate.
Okay.
You're not talking about standards, though. Are you talking about standards?
Standards, yes.
We're certified by,
We have Kalia, which is the
I know.
highest, and then the state just came out with their own years ago.
but the requirements or in terms of standards wouldn't, criteria, whatever.
So for use of force, the use of force would be the same for Kalia and Scalia, but the number of objectives that Kalia has. So Kalia might look at 85 and Scalia might say you only need 45.
Oh, okay.
So maybe
Standards are probably
Right, you got the multi-state portion, then you got the state portion. The multi-state's a bigger umbrella.
One thought, how about the training curriculum, is that published or is that more internal?
As far as what?
Is it anywhere published, anywhere on the website or wherever? The curriculum in terms of the training curriculum.
I don't know if they've ever posted it.
Mhm.
I know it's included in the annual report.
Oh, it is? Okay.
There's a section.
There's a section in the annual.
I thought of an example. I can't remember the class, but I do remember seeing this when I was looking at Scalia. One of the Scalia requirements had a different requirement for timeframes for training on one of the subjects. So I can't remember which Scalia said maybe every 2 years do the training, whereas Scalia said annually do the training. So, but you gotta be detailed.
Is Scalia voluntary as well, like
Yes.
Kalia?
Yes, it is. It is. Absolutely. And
Yes.
yeah, okay. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Good. Captain Patel, I'm gonna jump back to where we should have been. Let's talk about strategic review. Strategic plan.
What we're gonna look at for the strategic leadership plan is we talked about that it will be done internally. That Dr. Idson and her team, which will be comprised of probably myself, Chief Jenkins, Chief Weiss, Chief Walker, and a few others are going to come together, look at the certain objectives that we want to meet within the department. Then we are going to look at our stakeholders and identify them, get their feedback to assist us, as well as CPACs, as you guys being a stakeholder as well, is bringing your recommendations forward once we figure out what the objectives are. The time frame on this is to get the plan completed by 2025, as that is when this current plan is over. So it is a time and process. We've started some preliminary work on it, but it will be done in-house and rather than going outside.
Any questions? So when we talk about, you said by 2025, that starts in about 2.5
It'll be
years.
completed by the end of 2025. My apologies.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay,
so we
much
completed by the end. We're working on it through the end of 2025.
Okay.
Question, in terms of the ERA report, it was ended, but it said it'd be folded in the conversations around the strategic plan. Is that high on your priorities to incorporate that?
That is something that Dr. Idson will be working on. She is going to fully own the strategic leadership plan and incorporating the ERA into that.
Now, she gives us a little bit who she is.
It's Jill Idson.
Jill. You said Edison. Oh, you said
Idson.
Oh, that's
I'm sorry, so
She's
yeah.
a doctor. She just doesn't call herself that too often.
yeah, I realize she is. Okay, I got it. Okay.
All right. And I'm gonna let you move that directly into if we're talking about Jill.
Sure.
Let's move into your next piece.
So we've realized that when we hired Dr. Idson, her primary goal was to get us through the audit and look at the next evolution of her background, which is research. And that's what she does, is how to move us to the next step. So she'll be transitioning from her primary liaison role as a CPAC liaison. And we'll be shifting some of those duties to the clerk's office, but as well as other duties. So what's going to happen in 2025 is that the CPAC chair and vice chair, congratulations again, he will directly communicate with the city's clerk's office to schedule meetings and post agendas within the required timeframes, which you're all familiar with. The city's clerk's office will be in charge of hosting and facilitating these meetings. So once again, Dr. Idson did do that before, so we're just shifting that over to the clerk's office to have a relationship with. And once again, this is not going to be a here, you take it and run with it. We still work hand in hand, and it's going to be a clean handover. Please don't worry about that. For the full CPAC committee meetings, The chairs will continue to work directly with the CPD subcommittee liaisons for the agendas to help create the agendas. And then the subcommittee chairs will also send the agendas to the clerk's office for postings. The CPD will continue to host and facilitate these meetings. And then if there's any new business items, those will be posted on the agendas. So the biggest difference is that for the main CPAC meetings, the clerk's office will take the responsibility of that. The CPD will continue to lead the charge on the subcommittee meetings. Does that make sense? Any questions?
Okay, so when I develop my agenda for CPAC and I give the department review and input,
You email it to me.
so they'll have no more input, or I send it to you and then you turn around and send it to them?
Yes, well,
We'll have the input as well.
yes.
So
So
you
when
can-
you're done, me or Jennifer Cook.
Yeah. So that, again, I'll ask the question a different way. When I put together my draft of it, okay, you don't need a draft. When I send you the draft, because the chief likes his input, various different members like their input. Who's the point of
It'll go
contact?
to
I'm
DC
not gonna keep
Jenkins.
track of 20
It
different
will
people.
come, it will come to me, Paul.
Okay, that's the answer.
I'll get it.
Perfect.
And then we'll have our input, and then finally, once it's, you approve it, then it'll go to the clerk's office.
Okay, and then for the subcommittee, you'll have your primary department point of contact. Once you've communicated your agenda with them, same process. When that's done, what I would just say is send it, we'll get you the point of contact information. Maybe is really good, but also copy me on that. So if I need to follow up as the chair, I can do that. Okay, so that's our feedback process.
And once again, we're working hand in hand with the clerk's office. If there's any hiccups, please let us know. We're not just saying, hey, here you go. And Dr. Itzen isn't just leaving us permanently. She's just moving her duties to somewhere else. That's all it is. But we all still work in the same building. We all see each other multiple times a day.
All right, any questions? Okay, I'm gonna move to Captain Mitchell.
Good evening. So our first thing is tomorrow, which is Santa's escort. And you see all the gifts, and we're gonna leave out here at 8 o'clock and make out several different visits to the church, to the schools. And then we'll be back here at 1 o'clock for lunch. So if you want to participate in that, we're leaving here at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. On the 12th, we have Goodnight Lights. I don't know if you guys seen that. Sean Jenkins every Thursday night at 7 o'clock. So if you want to participate with that, please feel free.
Captain, you mind if I stop you for a minute? I'm gonna give it a tour. If you don't know what that is, or you haven't seen that, that is a worldwide, I call it worldwide phenomenon. I know I've said that video around of years past. I think Lieutenant Gibson, if he doesn't know it, I think I mentioned it to you. He needs to send up one of the drones and have a picture looking down. It's probably the most incredible, heartwarming thing that you'll see. I mean, I love all the things the police department does, but probably nothing touches my heart more than that, because I was that little kid living in a hospital at 3 and 4 years old for months at a time. And if we had something like that, that would have been incredible. So if you haven't seen it, all the departments come around, all the different first responders who have lights and sirens go outside of the children's hospital. They turn on the lights. The kids have the flashlights. I think you all even do a parade through the, don't you? Isn't there like a little parade?
So prior to the official, them turning the lights on, some of the representatives will go through the hospital and pass out small goodies to the kids. They're able to interact one-on-one.
That needs to be highly publicized, put it out on Facebook, talk to them about different footage, but that's something that city of Charleston, I've seen other places are now starting to adopt that, but the city of Charleston was actually one of the first ones to do it, and it's incredible. If you've never seen it, I've actually been there and seen it. It's incredible. It's what's it? The night lights? What's it? Good night lights. Good night lights. They're
Tommy, I'll
putting
get you all
kids to
that.
bed.
I'll get you all that information. Cool. I appreciate it.
And is that, it's on the 12th and it's again on the 19th?
The last thing is the 19th.
Good. Make that.
Good night to do a ride along. All right, Captain Mitchell, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. That's all you had. Okay, any questions for Captain Mitchell? Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Listed on the 17th.
Actually, we have 2 schools, Sanders Clyde and Mitchell Elementary. But you have to get a training. You have to get trained for that. So that's only for officers right now. We've gone to a training session, and then they give the child for 2.
What did they do?
Couple of steps. yeah.
Just to help them do them.
I could have used that. Be here right now.
If you do the.
Right. I don't know the whole map, so I'm lost in you. Okay, any questions for Captain Mitchell?
Is the, Mr. Ms. Claus Mitchell, is that I?
It's open, well, I wouldn't say it's open to the public. You probably can. You just have to get cleared through the school, but we will be there.
Thank you. The only other one is the one is the Citizens Police Academy. They've made, a lot of this one a while ago, they made some changes to it. I'm actually considering taking it again just to see some of the changes made and be able to interact with some of the citizens doing it. So I don't know if I can convince my wife to do it again, even my partner in crime, Gary, and he was a great partner to have. But I'm thinking I may do it again just to see what updates they've made. All right, new business. So like I mentioned at the beginning, I did meet with the chief, Tommy and I met with the chief. We met with Chief Jenkins and Captain Cretella, and really for them to bring to the table some of their, I wouldn't call them concerns, although they were concerns, some of their feedback to us, some of their, I think I'll use the term that they used, that eventually used, called the reimagining. Their involvement with CPAC. They don't determine what CPAC does. Okay, so they came to the table with their ideas, their thoughts, pretty spirited conversation, very transparent conversation. I think some people probably didn't take it well at certain points. I'll agree that there are times where I probably got a little bit combative, but that's the nature of what I do as a volunteer. And, we all, sometimes mark our territory. And are pretty well invested in what we all do. It's just no different than they are. So I think it was a good conversation. One of the things that came out of that was actually we were talking about, what Captain Cretella just mentioned. They've been good about providing us. It used to be Wendy. Wendy was that liaison. So not only scheduling meetings, but being able to take concerns back and forth and just the facilitation of information, not just the scheduling of meetings. Back when Wendy was here, we actually had a clerk who handled the administrative side. Then over time, through no fault of ours, because we worked whoever's put in front of us. When Jill came in, Jill actually was even bigger and better. I think we would all agree with that, on the knowledge transfer and helping us track down information that we needed, helping us facilitate. Yeah, a piece of it was helping us with our scheduling of meetings and things like that. So I know the chief has told us in this meeting and several other meetings that wasn't going to continue. That Jill, really educated, really her value was elsewhere, and that he was going to be pulling her back as a resource. So I think this is the first time we did talk about, okay, what does that actually mean to us? One of the things that came up from that, and I think it's probably smart to talk about, is the scheduling of our meetings, how often we do these. Is there value to do it every month, every 2 months, every 3 months? What's the value? One of the big things that the department said was their time constraints, their resource constraints, and their availability to come to as many meetings as we want to have in our subcommittee meetings. The ad hoc nature that our subcommittees have, where from month to month, every 2 months, nobody knows when that meeting's going to happen until right before it happens. A poll goes out, check everybody's schedule. The department has to adjust to it. It's kind of cumbersome administratively. So one of the recommendations made, but again, we decide as CPAC, nobody decides for us, is possibly moving towards having our general meetings quarterly, right? So having it every 3 months, that's the first thing that was put on the table. So Tommy, if you've got any special insight into what we talked about with that topic.
No,
that came up. So I want to know, is there any, I'm going to make this open. I'm not going to make my own motion for something. I want to know, what y'all feel about our meeting cadence for these general meetings. I want to tackle that one first. Y'all think once a month is too much? Every 2 months is too much? Once every 3 months is not enough? What do y'all think?
I think with the ability to always be able to call a special CPAC meeting, that maybe going to once a quarter is not necessarily a problem.
Okay. Any other And the truth is, the meetings are not, our meeting schedule is not part of our guidelines, so we can, you know, we can set those as we want. Yes, sir.
Well, just in the year that I've been here, it seems like that you're trying to get more action, for lack of a better term, in the subcommittees. So that could actually, that would be a natural evolution to go to quarterly meetings with the understanding that those of us who don't hold those committee, we need to attend more committee meetings and have a little more activity in subcommittees as opposed to.
Right. I tend to agree. I think I typically look at these general CPAC meetings as status updates and informative, but the work's done as subcommittees. I mean, I tend to agree with that. Does everybody think we should move? I mean, you know, is a general consensus we move to quarterly meetings?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
Okay. Make a motion for that, Paul.
Make a motion.
Make a motion to move our CPAC meetings to every 3 months quarterly.
Okay, using the same, what are we, the first Tuesday? Or what's the schedule? We'd have to look at that, but we would do the same, follow the same timing, but instead of being every 2 months, every 3 months. All right, is there a second?
Second.
All right, any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Now, again, just like the point that was made, that doesn't limit us. That's just our scheduled cadence of meetings. If we need to call an emergency meeting or a special meeting, we have the rules in place for doing that. And I'll certainly, you know, any one of y'all can do that. We just have to have the right form for it. All right, moving on to subcommittees. All right. Now, I'm going to bring this up and then we'll get into a more general discussion in a minute. But one of the things the department did come to the table with, should be no shock to a lot of you who've been here for a little while, is there is not appetite, desire, interest in CPAC having a complaint subcommittee. I was very clear in the meeting, just like I was when the topic came up in this room, whether it was with Steve or with anybody else. We didn't create the complaint mission. City Council did. If there was any concern on the part of the department or their legal staff, City Council should have been addressed rather than us. We are just taking, what happened is it was not addressed from the beginning when CPAC was first formed. As we got more settled in, the topic came up. This is part of our charter, of our guidelines, that this was a recommendation by City Council that we're not oversight, but there be a complaint subcommittee type created to review. And then the provisions were put in place in case a specific case was wanted to be brought out. The lawyers got involved. Heather, you're here. Steve, you're here. I will say it again as chair of CPAC. That was yours to figure out offline, not ours. We're not a legal team. We were going with what's put in front of us. So if there's any concerns over the language that was included in there, that was the avenue to go to, not us. We're not here to be the city's lawyers or city council. We just took it as a subcommittee. So, and knowing that, the department came back as they have and said that's not something that they've got the time or the interest in pursuing. So we have two options. Okay. And knowing that, you know, we as CPAC can go back to city council and say, we're not sensing an appetite from the department to be included in that process. Please clear up internally, you know, how you do a city council, what the rules are going to be. If you want to remove that, remove that. If you want to clarify the language, if you want to talk to your corporate counsel, if you want to talk to your employees on the Charleston Police Department, do that. But it's not our job as volunteers, from my perspective, to have an argument either way. We're here as volunteer servants. They're given a mission. We try to do the best of our ability. We're not here to get into legal debates or policy debates. That's somebody else's job. So, Tommy, I think, I think I hashed that out there,
Yeah.
but is there anything you want to throw up for more discussion?
Yeah, covered that.
And that's being completely transparent about the discussion that was had then. I want to open that up to y'all. You know, I didn't want to take this on until, you know, if I'm, you know, the new chair may have wanted to take it on a different approach, but I have my own approach as a chair that I'm about to lay out to all of you, but I want to hear any feedback that you guys have.
Can we be clear? want to make sure we're clear. Is the department saying we will no longer cooperate with a subcommittee on complaints?
The department said they will produce an annual report, and the annual report is what is the tool we will use. They've indicated they will not continue to provide, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I think you gave the report. They will no longer continue to provide where we requested like the sample case and just generic redacted, the whole thing. They've indicated they do not wish to pursue that going forward. And that's what they're going with. That is their path forward. They will not provide us supporting information other than the annual report.
Is there a reason given for that?
Yeah.
I mean, what's
The uncomfortable question we have to ask is why?
why? Yeah.
So
Is it
at the end of the
time?
day, when you look at the annual report, all the information in there, it talks about use of force. It talks about all our complaints. It talks about what was sustained, what wasn't sustained. It gives demographics as well. So all that information is coming out in the annual report. Also, it's being updated on our dashboard in real time. And if we need to kind of tweak our dashboard to reimagine it so that page 2 is going to go year to year or what that looks like. I'm not an IT guy. The way it draws it from the back end of our software program, I don't know anything about that, but we are not opposed to reimagining that and making that better for communication purposes. What we didn't have an appetite for is having a closed case that has been completely dissolved, bringing that up for the public consumption again, when that might have been almost a year and a half old, and that's what we're running into. And Chief Walker said, if you go into your employer saying, let's pull your file from a year and a half ago, and let's bring this up into the public's eyes. And it's just not fair. It's not the right thing to do. And all that information is in our annual report.
No, yeah, I mean, I would continue to say between Heather and Steve, you all were, Steve, I know you were employed by the city at the time the CPAC was created, and that was added to the CPAC guidelines. Heather, I'm not sure your tenure. In knowing our feedback, in doing our due diligence, has that been brought back to city council in any way, shape, or form to clarify why did you put this in and why did you give this to CPAC? Because it was really not about the annual report. It was actually the complaint process review, right? It wasn't to remediate old cases. We talked about redacting. It was never to be oversight to relitigate, right? Or be an HR department. It was to look at the complaint review process and watch and get a sample case when desired to see how did that process work, not necessarily the details involved, and to be able to report back to the community or have an input on the process itself. Have you all gone back to city council to ask that question?
It has not gone back to city council, but it's certainly a possibility.
Okay, so I'll give you, what I'll tell you as the chair, I'll give you the opportunity because I'm going to. And the reason why I said it, I don't want to sound threatening because that's not how we work. But I want to make sure we have clarification because at the end of the day, the police department are employees and they have a boss. And, at the end, we're trying to not be employees. We're trying to just go with the mission put forth. We have ERA reports that report on us too. And that's a reflection on these very valuable volunteers who decided to come here and participate. They're not trying to do something that they just made up. The complaint subcommittee was not something we created in this room. It was created by city council. And so we take that very seriously. And so that's something that I want to be very clear that we do need to look at. Now, I did talk to Jamie as chair of the complaint subcommittee because he's been owning that to see what's the value in moving forward with the complaint subcommittee. Do you see, and Jamie, I want to turn it over to you and give your thoughts on it.
Sure. I don't know that the guidelines create a complaint subcommittee. I think it just gives a charge to this body to do what it says. But I think the way it was decided was the most effective way to deal with that through a subcommittee, especially, the subcommittee can work, not on a, live stream. But, when Harrison and I guess started this maybe about a year and a half ago now.
Yep.
It took some time to get where we are. We're not much further, but the question is where do we need to be? What does it look like? I've said in a couple of meetings that I didn't think it was appropriate to be asking the department for these summaries that they have to manually produce out of the file for the particular officer because they don't exist in that format. But what's the purpose of why we would ask for one of those? And if you go back to the guidelines, the way I understand them is to review summaries of closed investigations and to make recommendations for modifications and enhancements regarding officer response and training based on identified trends and patterns. So I never envisioned it to be, hey, department, we want to see these 10 summaries just plucked out of the ether because we want to see them. It's, can we first see any identified trends or patterns to begin with? And if there was something identified that we could add value on recommendations or modifications, then maybe go ahead and get some summaries if necessary. So we did one, and it was very well done, and we all talked about it, and there were some suggestions on how it could be done better, but it was well done. So how do we look at the trends and patterns? And that's why we've been talking about the second page of the dashboard. I forget, you all know the term I'm looking for, where you can actually adjust, you could look at August of 2024 versus you can look at the whole year. You can do that on the front page. That's a good tool to look at it, trends and patterns, I believe. While I was sitting here listening the other way, because we don't know if that will ever occur or when it will occur, I guess we'll manually have to look at a few annual reports together to identify trends and patterns, if there are any. We don't know that there are. So I understand the purpose of what's in our guidelines related to closed investigations. Again, I think the way we decided was to implement it through a subcommittee, which is fine, I think. But I am happy to still be the chair of the complaint subcommittee, but I don't see us continually asking the department for summaries until we even can identify a trend or pattern, because I think that's how it has to be tied to a purpose. And if, the department or the city is not interested in doing the summaries, then I think that can be adjusted in these guidelines if the council wishes to. But we've never asked for another summary because there's been no particular purpose to ask for a summary. Could that occur in the future? Maybe, but we just haven't gotten there because we can't understand the data yet.
Well, I haven't been a part of the executive committee to hear this. Kind of blown away. I think the community, if they heard this, they would just bring into question and the credibility of the police department, notwithstanding what our role might be. I'm kind of disturbed by the fact that the department is saying we are not going to work with you. That's more troubling. We are volunteers. The city council approved those guidelines, which I would think would be something the police department should embrace and want to see fulfilled. I think if the press got a hold of this and it was communicated to the community, you're going to see some, no matter whether you're in Daniel Island or wherever, or West Ashley, if you would say, if there may be legitimate complaints and we want those complaints aired and addressed, and we are not even being an oversight, we're just being advisory. So I'm a little taken aback that given what the ERA report said, we are now moving a point where we are having less resources to do our job. And now it's said that, and that's contrary to, they say we need, the ERA report and the monitoring said we need to give more teeth to CPAC. And now we're saying, the police department is saying, we will not work with you on this particular issue. Why are we here?
What was the question I asked? In the room, what was the question I asked? You can say it.
Why are we here?
You're not alone. So, and with all respect to them, because I do appreciate they came to the table, but I was very clear at that time, I'd have to bring the concerns to CPAC because as the chair, I preside. I'm not a decision maker. This body does that. I wanted to bring that to the table. If you all think that, my natural reaction would be to go to Councilmember Shealy, who's who heads up the Public Safety Subcommittee, which is what we fall under, for his guidance and direction. From my perspective, and I'm only giving my own individual member perspective, or you can hail the city council members, but the truth is, what's their interest in CPAC at this point, many years later? Okay, we've got city council members who won't appoint anybody. They're telling me that they can't find a single person in their district to be represented, but this is also a priority to them, right? I've not seen a lot of interaction with city council members and you all, right? I don't see it. And so if they're not gonna value what we do as volunteers, I think the point I clearly made is I made my own personal recommendation to disband CPAC. If there's no value, if the department doesn't see a value, then I'll go to city council and say, there's 16 members that are volunteers, we're not paid. So when you talk about resource and restrictions, there's a difference between being on salary and leaving your paying job to come here. I'm not here to waste your time. And I made a commitment when I joined. I sat down with Chief Reynolds when I was about to be appointed to this. He wanted to meet with me. And I very clearly said to him, I don't believe in checking the box. Be very careful before you appoint me. Jamie knows how passionate I can get when I'm involved with things. I'm not doing this for a civic resume. I don't need one. Okay. I'm not running for office. There's nothing vested for me. I don't work in the city of Charleston. God forbid I never did. I work remotely. So this doesn't impact my job or my community standing. All right. I want to be of value. And if I'm not of value, I've got better time spent elsewhere. And I believe the same thing about every one of you. So I did ask the question. And I very clearly said, and I went around the room, what value do you find in CPAC continuing? And I asked, and I very clearly said, I'm happy to go to CPAC. And if they want to disband, I'll take that to city council and make a recommendation that we've run our course. You've outlasted the ERA report. You've got that behind you. It's done. What's the value of CPAC now? And I think the feedback came, they see our value. I'm not going to speak for them, but I'm going to repeat what was told. They saw our value in policy review. And I'll be fair and say, I kind of pushed back and said, so you got a group of people who are not law enforcement. I know a couple of y'all have been in law enforcement, but you're coming to a bunch of lay people to weigh in. I know some of y'all are lawyers too. Some of y'all have been both, to weigh in on policies and procedures. And is it really semantics? How much value are you really taking CPAC's recommendation into policies and procedures? And I'll tell you, they were very adamant. They do not want CPAC to go away because of the involvement of policies and procedures. One of the questions that came up was our involvement outside of our CPAC meetings. And I think I was kind of clear and said, I'm not, I think some of the community engagement activities are great. They're wonderful. And I highlight them all the time. I don't personally have the time to go to shopping at Target and some of the great things they do. I'm more, administratively, I think operationally, administratively, there are folks like Miss Imogene who, God bless her. She goes to every single event they have. She's an ambassador for everything we dream of being, but we each bring to the table our own skill sets, and not all of us. I'm not good at all the kumbaya moments. It's just not how I'm wired. I love them. I like being there, but that's my time spent elsewhere. So I did bring that to them. The second piece they said of value is communications, right? Helping them with these videos, helping them tailor the messaging they need to get out. I think there's areas of improvement. I think that's a work in progress. I used to be the subcommittee chair. I was the inaugural communications subcommittee chair. We were able to get out educational sessions for the community. It was a lot more robust. It kind of died down when we lost some of our focus. Tommy's bringing that back with more mindfulness towards the youth, because a lot of things that they're going to put out on these TikToks, you know, I don't need to be told what to expect of Charleston Police Department if they pull me over. But who's that education for? And I think it's good that we have somebody younger who can focus on getting those. I'm not a TikTok guy. I don't, you know, you tell me somebody can learn something in a 20-second video. I'm like, you're nuts. This should be a 3-hour lecture, but they're right. I'm wrong. So they told me that's the value, because I did walk away thinking, you know, I talked to Tommy and I talked to a couple others and said, you know, guys, if we're not going to get the level of cooperation, if they have to pull resources and they don't see the focus, if it's not the priority of, I'm making sure I got this right, of this administration, and I'm not saying that in a negative way, I'm just being honest and transparent. I don't want to waste y'all's time. I definitely don't want to waste my time. I want to make sure we have a function. So we did go around and ask them, if we reimagine CPAC, if that's the desire of this group, what would it be? Would it be focused on those two areas? Would it be going back to city council and getting clarification on what they see our new role under a new mayor, under I would say a fairly new city council? There's a lot of new members. There's a new chief of police. And with any change in leadership comes a change in priorities, comes a change in outlook, perspective, and sometimes a change in cooperation. I mean, it's just, I think Chief Walker is very good. And if y'all have not talked to him one-on-one, he prefers that one-on-one dialogue. If y'all have not worked with him, and I'll give you, again, my perspective, he's not a group meeting guy. It's not him. That's not his strength. He has plenty of people on his team who are amazing at it. That's not from my perspective. And I did get to help sit on an interview him and other candidates. And I very clearly in private and publicly said to him, as part of that process, you got your strong suits and you got your areas where he's not a big fan of the group meetings. He loves one-on-one. Every one of you is on his agenda to meet one-on-one and have discussions so you can get his concerns. We say that to the public, people that want to reach out to him. He likes that one-on-one dialogue. He's just more comfortable in that one-on-one. Now, again, as part of his role, he's got to evolve like we all have to evolve, and it's a public-facing position, but that's his concern. So I know when the new mayor came in, we kind of readjusted, and the logic was CPAC would be used, and we have. So when the different groups came and said, we want to interact with the department, we want to have group meetings, we want to have RA meetings, we want to have all these meetings, we were told at that time, that's what CPAC is for. I think city council, that was brought up. Steve, I think you brought that up in a city council meeting when one of the council members asked a question about public hearings. It was told that's what CPAC is for. We're not their voice. We're the conduit of information, education up, education back. I think that's now being viewed as CPAC shouldn't serve. I think that's what we heard. Correct me if I'm wrong. What we heard in the meeting was we don't want CPAC to be that role. We want these groups to come to us directly, or these individuals to come to us directly. And CPAC is not going to be our passer of information. Okay. You know, they can prefer their own communication standard. And, you know, if I'm running an office, I prefer my own too. You know, I don't get dictated to me how I communicate either. So putting that on the table, and did I miss anything from the discussion? Tony and Chief, you were in there. Have I said anything incorrectly? Because I don't want to misconstrue anything that was brought up. Okay.
No, the only thing I'd like to add is when you talk that we don't want to work with CPAC, we do want to work with CPAC. It was just a complaint subcommittee, and all the information that we have on the dashboard and the annual report is a lot more than what other agencies produce, and we're happy to be transparent about it. So please don't feel like we're hiding anything. We have all that information out there, and we've done better in a timely manner with getting that annual report out from where we started. It's a robust report, and the dashboard, we're using it more. So we are working, but we are willing to take on those challenges to put that information out there. And we aren't taking resources away from CPAC. I mean, look who's here tonight. You had 2 other people on the phone. So CPD is well represented here. So please don't feel that way at all. We're just moving Dr. Itzen away to what her role is research and evidence-based policing.
We were talking more about Jill set a certain standard and we've lost it for the time being. At least. And given what he said, we just don't know.
I can assure you will get that standard. You'll get the same service. I can guarantee you that with Chief Jenkins and my name on this, you're not going to lose that standard. I promise you that.
The other thing that we obviously need to tack on to that, and the comment was made in the public commentary, but we've heard it before. I think the loss of having that, not a clerk, but a city liaison who can help navigate, who's not necessarily an employee of the police department, is that there was a facilitator in place when CPAC was originally formed, and that was to help both sides. I'm not going to say sides, right? Both teams collaborate and come together and form that middle ground, so it doesn't become an us versus them. And I think that's if CPAC's to move forward with any value, any structure, then I feel, if y'all agree, my role would be to, not only to go back to the city council and say, okay, can we've been in play for now 6 years. Okay, so it's now 6 years and about 3 months. You've had 6 years of historical information and feedback. Please look at our guidelines, not just on rules and regulations. We've already done that. But your intent for CPAC, what is it now? Has it evolved? Has it changed? This is their opportunity to redefine it. And in doing so, they'll work with legal counsel to remove any language that's not in line with what the department's going to do. That's number one. Number two, it's their ability to work with the chief of police and the police department, and they do that through the chief of police, and indicate to him as their employee, here's what we've set forward. These are the terms to set forward, because that's not our job, right? And we shouldn't be put in that position where it's become, in some cases, become confrontational. We're just trying to do what we thought we were supposed to do. We go back and we read this stuff, and it's like, but you've changed your mind. Well, okay, I don't know. You changed your mind, but we didn't hear that from the people that appointed us. So getting clarification on that. And number two, if they imagine CPAC moving forward, will they see the value in providing us that liaison that we were originally provisioned to have, that we lost? We were using Jill in that manner. We used her a lot differently than we used Wendy, but that's the difference in the two people. Jill was, that's a bar that nobody's going to exceed. And I will say that in full transparency, we reached a level with Jill, not only her education that she brought to it and her background, her people skills, everything she brought to the table is it's a unicorn, right? So if we think we're getting another Jill, I can honestly say, I don't foresee that. If it happens, great, congratulations. But having somebody formally in that role that can be that conduit, so they can be the facilitator of agendas and doing stuff like that so that we can move that forward. So I've talked, I want to hear what y'all think.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
You unpacked a whole lot of stuff here. And I'm sort of like one of the newer people. I listen and I'm trying to decipher what exactly is the issue here.
The issue is we have items that CPAC has taken fairly recently because of our growing participation rate. Before, in the early days of CPAC, we just had people that didn't show up to meetings. They didn't participate. We couldn't get quorums. It was a really challenging. You all coming in as actual active members who do participate. It was important to start taking on the different areas within our guidelines that we were told CPAC, these are areas CPAC, we entrust you to do. We took the feedback from the ERA meetings, right? We were told, hey, participate in these ERA sessions. And there was feedback that came back from something that the city chartered, right? The department talks about this was voluntary, and we agree. It was voluntary for the city to do it, but the city chose to do it. The city chose to pay for a report that came out. Whether we agree with everything in that report or not, CPAC was mentioned quite a few times on what we're involved in and what we're not. And so responding to our own feedback, we started to get a little bit more engaged with our participants. And there's some type of pushback on, mission, resourcing, whether they have the resources available to devote to some of the things that we want to take on as part of our mission.
Yeah, but my thing is, this just didn't happen overnight. I'm trying to figure out the backstory behind why we are where we are tonight. Coming from a union's perspective, this doesn't happen like this. And I've been with the union for years, and I'm an officer, a former officer.
Yes, ma'am.
So therefore, I'm not getting the gist of why we are where we are tonight. And why you bring in something, if it's not broken, why do you need to fix it? And I come from another perspective with the Charleston Area Justice Ministry. Now, I'm not going to let this go just like this, because we need to ask some questions, some hard questions. Why are we here discussing this tonight? Because we were in existence for a while, and I've been on here for a while. So unless something went over my head, I'm not following what this whole dialogue is about.
So what I would say is there's both happen. Some things may have gone respectfully, you may have missed, but there's a lot of people that I've talked to that started to see this evolve, where there was certain pushback. I think some of it started when the complaint subcommittee first started. There was a little bit pushback there because we kind of went from being, I'm not going to say the feel-good group, because we've always, the policy subcommittee's done an amazing job. But we've started seeing some pushback, whether it's through resourcing. I know the chief has come to this group, and the deputy chiefs, and even Tony's come and talked about Jill's going to be moving out of that role. Jill's going to be moving out. So they've kind of started to lay the groundwork where we felt the temperature changing. Did it come to a head? Well, it wasn't like a crescendo that was building. Tommy and I were invited to a meeting by the department. We hadn't done that in the past. And, normally when I talk to Chief Walker, it's usually he and we talk to each other on the phone, or we'll go sit at a basketball game or do whatever. We just talk back and forth. Most of our conversations are pretty informal. This was a formal meeting. This wasn't a let's go have lunch and I can brainstorm with you. This wasn't a let's have a chatter. In fact, I asked, I'm in the middle of my day job. Can we do this over the phone? No. Can you and Tommy come to the police department and have a meeting last Monday at 4:00 in the afternoon? And I rearranged my schedule and I came to a meeting, and it was attended by the chief and two of his staff, and where they clearly outlined to us their path forward. So I would say to you, it's kind of both.
Yeah, just from my perspective, I did notice 6-9 months ago in discussions of the complaint subcommittee, there was a lot of kind of uncomfortableness from the department of saying, we're not really sure how we're going to respond. We're not sure what we think about this. We're not sure about, what to think about this request. We're not sure how to fulfill this request. So there was a lot of, this was Jamie, maybe, I think it was when I volunteered to be president.
It was with Harry.
It was 6 to 9 months ago. I just remember when Jamie took over, I said, yeah, that was when I sort of started paying attention. So it has been, out in the open a little bit, where you can kind of see that that was sort of the rub.
I want to say this, when it comes to complaint subcommittee, I'm going to put a different hat on for a minute. And a little bit defensive of the department, I blame, and I'll say it to everyone, I blame city council. They put a rule for us, but then did not coordinate what their rules were for people who do this for a living. They never, it's like it's in the rules, but did they sit down with the chief of police, and did they sit down with the staff and the internal affairs and say, guys, we're putting this on their plate, and this is how we want this to go. What do we want to do? No, rather what they did is they threw this into a general charter and said, now you all go off on your own and figure this out. And so the police department's acting no different. And I'm going to be honest and say no different. If a group of individuals came to my job if any of you came to my job to give me feedback about how to do my job, I'm not going to laugh right now, but I would spend probably the next year and a half trying to figure out your credentials, how you're even in the room with me to do what I do, because none of you are qualified to do what I do until you prove it. So your input to me, other than, just generalities, would be non-existent. I wouldn't invite you into reviewing my business process flows because you have no idea why they're in place. You're questioning from an outside view. So I look at city council, and I'm not blaming, there's a lot of turnover. CPAC was created. I call it a knee-jerk time. I think it was created to calm down a certain segment of people at that time. And then the checkbox was done. We created them. We've done our part. And then the priority moved away from what we do in our mission. And what was left behind is a group of very valuable volunteers and a police department trying to navigate, how is this supposed to work without any guardrails, without any instructions? Like you said, unions don't exist without 5,000 rules in place, and it takes an act of Congress to change one sentence that they do. I know unions too, not as well as you do, but I manage companies that have unions. So I want to be fair in saying that I'm not putting the onus of this on the department. I think I bring it back to city council that the path forward to me belongs to them, right? If it's on our mandate, to me, the question, I know the question comes up to the police department. You have rules in place. We don't want you. There's the public says, well, we don't want you to enforce those laws. And I'd be the same kind that says, well, go to your politicians that made the laws. We don't make the laws. We're 100% enforcement. Yeah. Do we enforce everything every single day? No, we don't. But if a law is broken, it's broken. It's the way it goes. Talk to your council. I feel the same way when it comes to this. We're here. We've been given our marching orders. We're trying to do that. And unless somebody changes their mind, we keep going. And so we need that liaison to help. We need city council to clarify. So that's my perspective as, as an individual and as a leader, right? That's how I would approach it. But again, as CPAC, this is our decision, our path forward, not mine, even though I don't want to be the chair. Jim.
Just in responding to all that, and this may not be very popular, but it's entirely possible that after 6 years, CPAC as currently written, has run its course. And I'm not sure for the department, at least, what real value it gives. I mean, we have departments, command officers in charge of communications and staff and civilians. We have command officers and staff in charge of internal affairs, of policies and procedures. We have lawyers in the room. That's what they do, as we heard. So I'm not sure today, as written, what value we actually give the department. And I'm not sure that the entire charter is devoted to value for the department. And I understand there's a public component of that. But I think it needs to be looked at. I think our charge needs to be looked at.
Does that sound like a speech I gave? And I did. And so I went around the room, and one of the hard questions I asked, because there was a little bit, I did say, fine, then I'll take the approach we need to terminate CPAC. I kind of cut off the discussion because I was getting frustrated too. If you don't find value in us, we're not going to be here. Right. And so I politely or impolitely, however I did it, I cut off the chief and I turned to Deputy Chief Jenkins. And I asked him, and I'm not putting you on the spot because we're all adults here. And I actually looked at him and said, and I cut everybody else off, and I said, can you do me a favor and tell me, you've been doing this now for 6 years. He's been with the department a long time. Tell me the impact that you've seen from CPAC. How has it moved the needle? And I've asked him, point blank, how has it moved? Don't answer anything else. I want to know specifically, have we moved the needle in how you do things or what you're doing? Was that a fair question? I asked you pretty verbatim, right? And he was very honest with me. He sees our value, but when it comes to the day-to-day job, no. But again, that could be the scope of control and command and control that he has, right? But I asked that question. Now, I asked the same question to Captain Cortella, who was in the meeting. And he's worked with us a lot more closely, right? You know, he's been I think he's been our de facto liaison for a long time. And again, I value everything you do. He like Jill, we're never going to see that level of cooperation. And I'm not going to say cooperation, just the demeanor he brings to the table. Just, you know, you're an amazing guy to work with, but you know, don't call me when you're getting promoted. And I asked him the same thing. And Captain Cortella actually, because he worked with us more directly, he fought with me because I said, let's just disband the policy subcommittee. I mean, I did. I was pretty adamant about what's the point, right? If you're only changing a word or two or nothing's happening. And he said, no, you all have actually been very valuable, whether you know it or not. He did cite Doris, our former council member, who, I mean, Doris was behind the scenes, guys, you know, which you may have not, you know, in the meetings, you may not have seen it come out, but behind the scenes, she was calling him day and night and day, following up. She rattled that cage more than probably any five of us will rattle that cage. And for whatever reason, you know, you responded well to it. It worked, right?
Doris made us look internally, asked me the question, well, how can you review your policies? So, well, Doris, that's an easy question to review them all the time. And then she asked a follow-up question and I gave her an answer and she followed up with something else. And I said, well, let me do some homework. Went back, did my homework, met with, I think, the next policy subcommittee. We had a good exchange of just information and we realized that we don't review our policies as much as we should be reviewing them on a thoroughly documented basis. So what came out of that conversation is that we touch every policy at a minimum once every 3 years. So your big policies, pursuit, use of force, less lethal and lethal weapons, and Office of Internal Affairs. All the major policies get touched at least once a year. They'll do a quick one over. But your policies that, quote, I don't say aren't as important, but your uniform policy, that doesn't need to be reviewed every year. That could be every 3 years. The grooming policy, every 3 years. So yes, Doris called it. Now we are in that rotation. If you look in the top right part of the policy, it'll say the revised date. Now last time that was revised, and that all came from CPAC. So yes, there is a great influence on us, and you guys have helped us out in changing those policies. Because before, like I said, yeah, we review them, but we didn't have a systematic measure to review.
Okay, so Deputy Chief, you got a pretty important role in the world. So being put on the spot is not a uncommon thing for your position. You've had about a week and 2 days to think about the feedback that I gave when I asked, should we exist? And I have no doubt you did what I did. I left the meeting and I talked to Chief Walker. I talked to various people. You all as an internal team, you saw our reaction, took our feedback. Give me your perspective on what you think CPAC.
So in that meeting, when you asked me the question, you asked me in my day work what I thought about it. I also said I see a lot of purpose in you guys. I think the way you look at this thing is looking at how can we get input from the community from you guys and take that input back, take that information back from us back to the community. I think that's more of what Chief Walker is looking at.
Okay. Any questions? I mean, that's a good perspective. So,
But I'm sorry, I thought you said earlier that they didn't want to do that they wanted the groups to go directly to the department. Or are you thinking more global, not specific groups, but just in general?
In general.
Okay, that makes sense.
So that's developing. So what that would translate to for us is developing your constituency, right? So if you're within a district, if you're part of homeowner association, neighborhood groups, think of your constituency. What populace do you have to reach out to? In all fairness, I look around this group and I see, you know, we all are pretty close in the same age group. Tommy, you're the outlier, of course. We don't have our two high school students who are probably bringing, again, my perspective is the perspective that the department needs, right? Is the youth coming up who are their initial interactions with law enforcement. The kids that are getting what we call the talk, right? How are we helping the police department address their concerns? Our concerns are as parents and grandparents. Our concerns are not typically on ourselves, right? It's how the younger people are being interacted with. So how do we develop that constituency to provide that feedback for the department? Because really, at the end of the day, that's the community that needs our help the most. A lot of these groups, they do a good job. Neighborhood groups do a good job speaking for themselves. They have pretty good leaders, much better leaders than me. I know that because I've been in meetings with them where, they hold their team leader accountable. They're in that face every day. I mean, I'm over Carolina Bay, and I think we're probably still the largest HOA community in the city of Charleston. And I send a note probably once every 3 to 6 to 7 to 8 months, and I get a response back in 5 minutes, and it's done. And we don't have ongoing issues. We do, but I don't bring it to them myself. But again, let's talk about, I know we're at time. What do you all feel should be the path forward? Should I go have a discussion? Is it something we table and talk about later? What do y'all really feel we should do, knowing that, there's now, there's a limit on resources and time. That was clear. There are some asks from the department on how we pursue the complaint subcommittee, and in general, some of our interactions. How do y'all want to move forward with this?
I think going to a city council is the way. I mean, for us trying to figure, if they're the ones that create the CPAC, and they need to say what they want the CPAC to be. And then rather than us and them trying to figure out, it's like we need the parent to tell us how the kids need to interact. We don't.
I agree in that. That's why, whenever you need, it's like in the military, one of our general orders is to always, when in doubt, seek clarification.
Once
do not understand, but I will find out.
Once that's clarified, I think you'll have a more of a, I say, retreat, for lack of a better word, to try to help plan and define how we operate within that, the guidelines or whatever the city council does. Now, if it says we are sunset, then we don't have to be. But
it could be.
Yeah.
I mean, if we're sunsetted, we're sunsetted. What my plan forward would be, so I'll propose this to y'all. My plan forward is I want to set a meeting. I'll bring Tommy into his vice chair. I want to bombard the guy. Set a meeting with Kevin Shealy, just to outline some of our concerns. He's not going to, if he's good, he won't give me answers in real time. You never solution in real time. If he's good, which I know Kevin is, he'll go back, research, discuss, do his discussions. And I want to prepare him for that, to have a meeting with CPAC so that you all can express your concerns. I'll do it as your leader, as the chair. I'll do that for the initial outline of information, but I'd want to bring him into a meeting with us and let you all have that same discussion. Certainly I'll leave it up to him whether he wants a department. For me, you're always invited, because this isn't us against them. To include them in that discussion, because when you only meet with one party and then you go meet with another party, I love politicians. I have a degree in it, but politicians have a tendency to talk to their audience. I do. I know that. And so I know we're all capable of that, to come together as a group and talk it out, and then let Kevin go to city council if he chooses to, with a proposition on which direction we go, what changes do we make, what needs to happen, because that comes from them, not us, right? I just wanted to bring it to you guys to all understand what the current, and they're, listen, you reach out to them, they're more than agreeable. They're a great team to work with. Don't take this in a negative way. It's a new administration that has a different perspective on how this stuff works. And, when we talk about it, you hear it all the time. Elections have consequences. Well, even in the city of Charleston, elections happen, changes are made, new leaders come in and say, I was elected on this platform. New people are hired as chief of police after an interview process, who were hired after laying out what their agenda is and what their plan is. And you have to respect that that's what they're going to move forward with. And in this case, I respect Chief Walker was very clear during his interview process and subsequently, and so was Mayor Cogswell, and so were the different city council members. So when I do hear it's a new administration and a new chief, I can't disregard that either. And I do have to take that into account and bring that to y'all and let you all feed you as much information as it comes to me as well.
So
Right.
just real quick, if I can interject, I totally understand change of administrations, be it CPD or the city council. But for those of you who don't know my background, I come from very high-end banking and finance and investments. Was executive for one of the world's largest banks. And I can't caution people enough on headline and reputational risks, just like Harris was saying. We can help buffer that. We can help you. But watch out, because that shit slams you hard and it comes out of nowhere. So just be real cautious on that. And that's where I think we can help. And that's where we try to get this transparency. And transparency will always counter any problems with not being, will always offset headline reputational risk. If you can say, we've always talked about this, we've always done this, we've always been truly transparent, headline reputational risk is not a concern anymore. The second you start sealing off, which I personally do feel has been happening the past couple of months or 6 months, you know, you're on your own, and that's where it gets very difficult, especially in policing. I can tell you it was really hard in the financial services world.
What I would ask y'all to do, obviously, I'm going to reach out to Kevin in my official capacity and work through that. Reach out to your various city council members, because that point is also well taken. And I do not think, so I don't want us to continue as a check the box, because people are afraid of headlines that I was sitting on city council and I voted to disband them. So let's check the box. Again, we need you, but they don't give us a plan moving forward. They don't give detailed instructions. I caution you against that, because there's no sitting mayor in the city of Charleston or any southern city or any city in the United States who's going to say, I'm going to be at the helm of disbanding a public group who was designed to help give us some kind of feedback back and forth with the police department. As rigid as Chief Walker can be sometimes, and he can be, and I love him for it. I mean, I'm transparent enough to say I voted for him to be the chief. I mean, I endorsed it because I like that side of him. He will also not want to be a sitting chief of police with a public backlash. You know, granted, he can weather any storm. All of them can, but nobody wants to sit at the helm of saying we disbanded CPAC. So I challenge you to reach out to your city council members. If you're appointed by the mayor, hell, all of us are under the mayor. Reach out, give your feedback on your concerns as CPAC members on them sitting down and laying out a true plan and mission for us if they choose to rubber stamp us into continuance, right? Give them the challenge, because this is their job, not ours, right? It's not my job. You know, I'm an HR guy, and I sit up there in the world that Dave sits in. That's my level of HR. And there's never been a day where I'm going to write my own job description. Because if I do, it'll be the easiest job description you've ever seen in your life, because you were dumb enough to let me write it. So we will not entrust ourselves to create our own mission and our own path forward. We want their guidelines, and from there, we establish our rules using that mission. And I think that's the path forward. All right. Any other questions, comments, or concerns? I think we beat that to death. I got a plan. All right. Anything else?
Do we need anything formal vote wise for you to?
I can go talk to him. I mean, if y'all want a motion, you can do it. You want it on the record, but at the end of the day, you know, that's because we fall under city council, and our role is to interact with our council members in the city. You know, this is just going and sharing an opinion with him. I'm not taking a motion to them. And this is really our concerns as a committee. And that should be the feedback that we should always be able to have as a committee. All right. But again, anybody's welcome to put a motion. I mean, I don't think I need it, but I'm not the decision maker.
I don't think we do.
All right. I appreciate everybody's time going over. I'm not going to ask if there's any more questions, because at this point, we were supposed to adjourn 25 minutes ago. So thank you all for your time. I especially want to thank May Lee, because she's unlike most of us. It is a very critical time for you. So I appreciate you being here. Thank you. And as of 7:26, do I have a motion to adjourn?